Karina went inside the manor, and the doctor follows her. As they were walking, the doctor asked, "Does His Grace not know yet?" Karina stopped and sadly said, "He doesn't? I imagine it wouldn't be very pleasant for him to find out he's living with someone who's about to die soon." She added, "I was planning on leaving this place quietly, because I didn't want to hurt Milian." Then she turned towards the doctor and said, "But his words of consolation felt so warm that it made me want to stay here a little longer. I'm quite selfish, aren't I?" Then they sat down to heave tea. Karina said, "I'm sorry I hid my identity when I first came to you." "Don't worry about it," Dr. Winston replied. "A patient's social position doesn't matter at all. But more importantly, doesn't the Leopold family have a personal doctor?" she explained, fidgeting nervously. "I didn't feel like I could trust him, so I went in search of someone else." "And why was that?" he asked gently. She replied, "It's a long story," the doctor pressed. "Please go on. Anxiety can be the root of numerous illnesses." "What happened?" Karina hesitated before beginning. "Everyone in my family but myself was at the center of my world. I had to be a supportive younger sister cheering on my older brother, who was the successor of the family, and I had to be a kind older sister who gladly made sacrifices for my younger siblings. I didn't have the luxury of demanding things for myself." She paused, memories flashing vividly in her mind. Even on the day I had been upset about having my wallet taken away by my younger brother, she asked her mother, "Can I sleep with you tonight?" But she refused, saying she was too tired from dealing with Felden. She scolded her for making him cry, telling her she should have just given him the wallet. In frustration, Karina blurted out that I wished I didn't have any siblings. That earned her a slap and harsh words about how ungrateful she was. Her mother said, "How could you say something so horrendous and childish? You should be thankful that you're not sick like Leah. And you should be ashamed of yourself for not being kinder to Felden. I couldn't ask for anything more if Leah was half as healthy as you." She continued, "Whenever I said that I didn't feel well, I was accused of lying. My happiness was always compared to that of those less fortunate than me. And my parents once said they'd send me to the slums if I complained again." After hearing that, doctor said, "It must have been exhausting to live with people who hurt you again and again. You did a good job enduring all that pain until now." Karina sniffled as she heard that. He said, "Compared to your story, mine could seem trivial, but I had my share of pain when I was younger." He began reminiscing. "I loved doing embroidery ever since I was a boy. But people looked down on me and said that embroidery wasn't for boys. My parents wanted me to become a knight and earn a title, but I hated even the idea of it. So I stubbornly continued stitching. Whenever I picked up a needle, all of my worries would evaporate. I suppose you felt that way too." Karina nodded as he said that. He continued, "Then one day, I lost something I cared for greatly but gave up trying to find it. I embroidered that object and set it on fire, just like how people burn the belongings of the deceased after their funeral. And as I showed you before, a miracle happened. Afterward, it was as if I had become a hero. I helped track down criminals and found lost pets or missing children. After years of being ignored, that was the first time I felt like I had accomplished something great. There weren't any words to describe how happy I was. And when 20 years passed, I found that my sight was deteriorating. I couldn't embroider as well as I used to. Then I was diagnosed with art disease. I was told that I would become blind if I continued to sew. I despaired. I even thought of ending my life, so I left everything behind to do just that. But on my journey, I found a new dream. I wanted to help the sick, and give hope to those suffering from art disease. That's why I came to find you." Hearing that, Karina smiled and said, "I see." He added, "Also, I want to tell you that you did the right thing by distancing yourself from your family. Some say that confronting your problems is the shortcut to healing your pain, but I think that spending some time away from it is also a way to heal. Since you've escaped your family, try to make new relationships and wonderful memories." Karina concluded, "I thought I was being a coward by leaving without saying anything." As she was busy thinking, the doctor said, "You didn't explain the part about your family doctor." Karina said, It's quite an embarrassing story, but," she began recalling, "I think I was about 17 when our family doctor came to Leopold Manor. It was just an ordinary day. I was taking a walk in the garden. Suddenly Nocturne came and said, excuse me. I didn't know there was anyone here." Karina asked, "Who are you?" Nocturne introduced himself. "I'm the new doctor for House Leopold. My name is Nocturne." "Pleased to meet you, my lady," Karina said inwardly. That was how I met my first love. When I first met Nocturne, it felt as if spring had finally arrived. He was a very friendly person and a great conversationalist. I had never felt such warmth from someone before. She felt like wanting to know him more. She went to him and said, Nocturne? He stands up and asked. Lady Karina, how may I help you? She said. I was just curious about what you were up to, Nocturne said while smiling. The flowers in the garden were in full bloom, and I wanted to pick one to show someone. Karina thought, perhaps, he was going to give it to me. Her heart raced at the thought. I had never received flowers from anyone before, so I didn't know how I should react. Nocturne then turned and said, Abelia, look at this flower. Isn't it pretty? Karina realized, but I was mistaken. Later in the study, Karina was burrowing through books. Abelia whined. Karina, I want to go outside and play. Karina reminded her gently. Remember what Nocturne said. You need to rest today. Abelia walks close to Karina while saying, Humph, but he always says I shouldn't go outside if I feel even a little unwell. Even if I act like I'm fine, I can't fool him. That's because he's always looking your way. Karina thought, feeling a pang of upset. Nocturne treated Abelia especially well. He always seemed so protective of her, and I couldn't help but feel overshadowed. Meanwhile, Abelia was saying, he always suspects me of lying and tells me not to do this or that. She muttered while frustration spilling out. Karina was putting the book back and thought, I'm such a horrible sister. I can't believe that I feel jealous of Abelia. Then Abelia comes from the opposite of the bookshelf and pouts. Suddenly the bookshelf tilts and fell. There was a loud crash. Nocturne came burst opening the door. Abelia? He saw Karina underneath the bookshelf while the other bookshelf was holding it from falling on Karina. Abelia was standing beside the bookshelf. Nocturne rushed to Abelia, who was weeping and saying, Nocturne! I didn't do it on purpose. Nocturne rushed over. His concern was entirely focused on Abelia. Are you hurt anywhere? He asked. I'm fine, she replied weakly. Karina, who was still underneath it, felt pain. Ouch. She was about to begin Abel, but got interrupted by Nocturne's yelling. What in the world do you think you're doing? He yelled, his anger directed at Karina. Unlike you, Leah's frail. Karina again tried to speak, but the shelf suddenly. But Nocturne doesn't stop. Thank heavens it fell to your side. What would you have done if it had collapsed on Leah? What were you thinking, bringing her to such a dangerous place? Are you trying to kill her or something? Karina's ankle was hurting and was swollen. She doesn't complain about it. Do you like Abelia? She asked hesitantly. What? No, but I'll do anything to keep her safe. I can't afford to lose someone again, he said firmly. And just like that, he picked up Abelia and left the library without a second glance at Karina. Karina told, I was so shocked and hurt from having all those books fall on me. So I sat there for a while, trying to calm myself down. But he didn't come back to check on me. After hearing that, Dr. Winston thought, Nocturne, this is exactly what I feared he would do. I told him so many times that he should be careful not to project his dead sister onto a patient, and that he should treat all his patients equally. Karina continued, That's when I realized Nocturne, the family doctor, didn't care about me. He was just like my parents. Abelia was his priority, not me. She taked a sigh and said, Even if I was given a checkup and he found out I had heart disease, I don't think he would have told me out of fear that the news would shock Abelia. Milian was listening to all of this standing outside the door. A while ago Milian was walking in the hallway thinking, it seemed like Karina was about to say something to me. I wish she should just tell me everything honestly. He suddenly heard. Said that I wish I didn't have any siblings, and that was the first time that my mother ever hit me. Looking at the door, Milian thought, I don't like to eavesdrop, but, now, after listening to everything he was enraged. He said inwardly, This is outrageous, Milian thinks. Now I understand why she smiled like that, and why she was so excited about looking around the market. It also explains why she acted so frustratingly at times. She had no choice but to act that way because of the walls surrounding her life. He remembered her saying, If it's all right with you, please invite me out next time as well, he then said aloud. All right, I can do that. Later at night, Karina was drawing the monster Milian had slain. After drawing his portrait, she looked at it and said, All I have to do is color this. After a few moments she realized, no, this isn't enough. She thought, I feel a bit guilty about trying to use one of my creations, but I want to help Milian in any way I can. He was of the few people who were genuinely worried about me. I don't want him to get hurt, she said aloud. I'm about to die anyway. This won't make much of a difference. She then pulls out her supplies and said, My art supplies are running low. Should I ask Milian to get me some more? She quickly rejected those thoughts. No, I can't ask him to help me. Not when he's already helped me so much. She shakes her head. While thinking, she glanced, and her gaze fell on Heron. She remembered. It's a northern tradition. We believe that if a sick person carries a heron, it will help them get better. She thinks, maybe that's why I feel a bit better today. It's almost like magic. Later, while in Courage, Karina said I could have gone alone. Milian replied, we couldn't look around yesterday because those herders suddenly appeared, and we weren't able to buy you clothes for the winter. Then he asked, did you sleep in today? Karina was surprised. Huh? Milian said, I didn't feel you watching me this morning. Upon hearing that, Karina gets blushed. While fidgeting, she said, I slept late last night because I was drawing. He replied, really? Do you need any more drawing supplies? Karina panickingly said. No, I have my pencils. Hearing that, Milian thought, huh, they do say that only a bad workman blames his tools, but, he then said, in the north, it could be a bit difficult to find specialized, high-quality tools that you're used to using. But if we look carefully, I'm sure we'll be able to find something to your liking. Karina beamed with happiness. I'm fine with anything. She chuckled while thinking. I didn't get to use such tools back at home anyway. I was scared that father might find out if I ever bought high-quality materials myself. Milian asked, do you feel better today? If you don't, make sure to tell me right away. She asked. What will happen if I do? Milian groaned. We'll head back immediately, of course. Isn't that obvious? Karina averted her gaze, thinking. Haha, it's a good thing I got enough sleep last night. Then Milian said, anyway, I'd say you're quite lucky. Dr. Winston came just in time for the winter. I think my friend will stop by soon as well, Karina asked while getting off the carriage. Your friend? They started walking towards the shop. Milian said, he's the head of the Carlos family. He's quite interested in finding new talents. I sent him your drawing a few days ago. Karina jolted. What? You sent that? He replied. Since he knows a lot about art disease, I thought he could be of help to you. They were inside a shop where Milian said to a servant, we're here to buy winter clothes. The servant bowed and said, yes, Your Grace. Karina said to him, how could you just send that sketch to Duke Carlos? He asked. Is there a problem? Saying that, they started following the servant. Karina said, it's embarrassing. The drawing isn't that good and, he asked, what's embarrassing about your work? She replied, I'm not trying to be humble. I'm just flustered and nervous. Like when someone reads your diary, he said. A diary, huh? I'm sorry. I didn't think of it that way. Suddenly the shop owner came and greeted them. Welcome, Your Grace. We've been expecting you, Milian replied. Yes, it's been a while. Karina, this is Arya, the owner of Chiffon Boutique, Karina said. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Arya. I'm Karina Leopold, shop owner said. Oh, please feel free to just call me Arya, my lady, Milian said. I'd like to see a couple of winter dresses, clothes for daily wear, as well as some comfortable work clothes. Karina gets surprised. That many? Milian asked. Don't you need more comfortable clothes? Karina gets flustered. I don't need work clothes, Arya smiled and asked. What kind of work clothes do you have in mind? Milian replied. She needs them for when she draws. Just bring out all of the expensive ones. Karina stopped her. Milian! Really, you don't have to. He glanced at her hand with which she was tugging her robe. He beamed with joy. Choose as many as you like. Then the shop owner said, why don't you look over the dress samples first? Then we'll take your measurements and make the clothes accordingly, Karina said. All right. But I don't need that many. Just a couple would do. As the servant was taking measurements, Karina was thinking, I had no idea this was going to happen. I won't be able to wear them for very long anyway. She looked towards Milian. He was staring at her. She quickly turns her head and thinks, what should I do? Later, Karina slumped in her seat, exhausted. Then the boutique owner came and said, Lady Karina, now you just need to take your pick from this selection of dresses. She thought, this wasn't my first time at a boutique, but I've never been to one where I was asked so many detailed questions before. Karina, are you all right? Milian's voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up at him and noticed his hand resting on her head. His touch felt cool and refreshing, almost calming. Without thinking, she rubbed her head against his hand. Sorry, she gasped. It felt so cool that I couldn't help but. Do you have a fever? Milian asked, concern clouding his expression. If you're not feeling well, we should head back to the manor, Karina stammered. No, I don't think so. I'm just a bit exhausted, Karina groaned inwardly. I must have been out of my mind. I can't believe I just rubbed my dace against his hand like that. Looking at her flustered, Milian thought. She's terrible at hiding her thoughts. Well, do you see any clothes you like? Milian asked, changing the subject. She admitted. They're all very beautiful, so… Milian cut her off. Oh, really? You like them all? As he stands up, she realized she tried to stop her. Huh? Milian? She stuttered as his expression turned serious. Later, as they were walking in the market, Milian asked, Why are you so sullen? I said I was fine with buying you that many clothes, she replied. And I told you I don't need that many, she was feeling blushed. I've never heard anyone say they wanted to buy everything off the rack, Milian said. Really, think of this as my apology for showing my friend your drawing without asking you, Karina sighed. Honestly, I can't stay angry at him, but I won't be able to wear them all anyway. If you keep the clothes, I'm sure you'll end up wearing them someday, Milian said with a kind smile. Karina thought. His gestures are making me hesitant to leave. How should I repay him? She wondered. Are you sure you're fine? Milian pressed while staring at her. Of course, she replied quickly. He said, The store Arya mentioned isn't far from here. Let's stop by there before heading back to the manor. As Karina doesn't reply, he asked, Karina, are you listening? Karina grabs her hand and squeezes it. Noticing that, he grinned and said, Let's go. We don't want to be too late getting back. After reaching that shop, Karina was amazed. This place is filled with the sharp smell of paint. Karina let go of Milian's hand as soon as they walked in. The storekeeper greeted them with a skeptical look. I don't see folks like you often in a store like mine. What brings you here? We're here to buy painting supplies, Karina replied happily. You've come to the wrong place. We don't have any of the high-end stuff you're probably looking for, the shopkeeper said gruffly. Milian grumbled. Are you out of business? Karina quickly stopped him. I'm not looking for anything fancy. All I want are some paints and flat brushes. The shopkeeper then noticed something. He leaned towards Karina and said, May I examine your hands? What are you? Milian began, but Karina stopped her. It's all right, Milian, she reassured him. You're an artist, the shopkeeper said after a moment, releasing her hands. Forgive me. I thought you were just a wealthy lady dabbling in art for fun. Everything's for sale. Take a look around, Karina said. Thank you, the shopkeeper then said to Milian. I'm sorry for grabbing your lover's hand earlier. I can tell whether someone's an artist by looking at their hands. We're not a couple, Milian interjected. Ah, I see, the shopkeeper said. It seems like she's been drawing for quite some time. Does she have an atelier? She hasn't been here that long, Milian replied. But I was about to make one. Bring whatever's needed for an atelier. I'll pay for it all, the shopkeeper replied. All right. We have all of the most basic equipment here, Milian said. I'll send someone to bring everything to you, he then asked. Were you an artist as well? How can you tell just by looking at someone's hands? I was, he admitted. Before I lost my arm to a disease, Milian asked. Are you referring to art disease? The shopkeeper said. Ah, you know about it. That's right. He looked at his hand reminiscently began. One day, my fingers started going numb. Then they hardened, and I couldn't move them freely anymore. I tried drawing with my left hand, but the same thing happened. After moving to the north, though, the pain and fever got a lot better. Pain and fever? Milian murmured. He began. Then, but hot interrupted by Karina. I'm all done. She was holding the supplied. Milian. Is that all? Karina replied. Yes, this will be more than enough, she thinks in her mind. I can't choose more when he's already spent a fortune on those dresses for me. Mister, include this with everything else that will be delivered, Milian said firmly. Everything else? Karina asked, confused. Milian declared. You don't have a proper workshop at the manor, right? So, I'm going to make you an atelier, Karina began. Milian, you really don't have to. But suddenly she felt throbbing pain in her heart, and was about to fall. Karina! Milian shouted, enticing her. After some time. It's so hot. I feel like my heart is on fire. Karina gasped, clutching her chest. Her heartbeat was erratic, and each breath felt suffocating. It's so suffocating. I can't breathe, she thought, panicking. She opened her eyes and saw Milian's hand on her head. Milian? He asked, looking concerned. Are you awake? She replied. Yes, I feel much better. I just had trouble breathing back there, Milian said. According to Dr. Winston, it was due to accumulated fatigue. She averted her gaze, saying, perhaps it's because I didn't get much sleep. I'll make sure to go to bed early from now on. Milian's eyes narrowed slightly. Karina, are you being honest with me? Huh! She blinked, startled. He said, when you lie, you avert your eyes and smile just like you did a moment ago. Karina's face flushed. How did he figure that out? Covering her face with her hands, she muttered, can't you pretend you didn't notice? No, Milian replied. Who knows when you'll collapse again, she then said. Milian, he asked. What is it? Karina began hesitantly. You shouldn't be so kind to me. It'll only make things harder when we say goodbye. So let's refrain from being so nice to each other. 2 guards were on duty at the gate. One of them were yawning, the other said, I won't be surprised if a fly flew into your mouth, the other replied. Well, I'm bored out of my mind. I wanted to go slay demonic monsters too, first one said. It's your fault you always lose bets, the other replied. That's true, but, the first then noticed a carriage approaching. He pulls out a telescope to take a look at the carriage, he then said. Open the gates and let him in, the other guard replied. Right away. But who is it? Can't you tell? It's Duke Ferrio Carlos, came the reply. The other was surprised. Really? The one infamous for being bad-tempered? The first replied. Yes, but that's to be expected of His Grace's friend. Both of them laughed. Back in Karina's room, she struggled to stay still. Haha, I finally managed to get out of bed, she murmured. She remembered Milian saying, no, you must rest. He hadn't let her move around for 3 whole days. Though grateful for his concern, Karina felt restless. Looking at the canvas of the monster she drew, she picks up paints and brush and said inwardly, I want to help Milian, she resolved, her determination shining in her eyes. After some effort, she sighed in relief. I finally finished it. I hope that this will. Her sentence was cut short as the ground began to tremble violently. A foot came out of the painting she drew. She was shocked. Wait, this is… Everyone in the manor heard the loud noise. Milian burst into the room. Karina! Are you alright? The entire manor is shocky. He saw Karina holding back a monster. Me Milian! She cried. He gets ready to hunt the monster. Karina, get out of the way! He yelled, but Karina rushed to him to stop. She shouted. Milian, wait! He gets surprised as to why is she stopping him. Karina, she said. This one is good, her eyes glowing with an unearthly hue. Karina, the color of your eyes has… Milian hesitated, concern etched on his face. Karina asked, stepping back. I'm sorry. It's disturbing, isn't it? No, Milian said softly. I think it suits you. But more importantly, did you just create a miracle? Karina flinched hearing that. Milian groaned. As far as I know, art disease gets worse the more you perform miracles. Or am I wrong? So let me… Milian began, reaching for his sword. No, you can't! Karina exclaimed, hugging the monster. Then let's keep it outside for now, Milian suggested. Is it dangerous? He asked. Karina assured him. No, not at all. At least, I don't think so. Then he said, looking at the mess in the room. All right. The mess left in the aftermath was overwhelming, Karina said. I'm so sorry. I had no idea it'd be so big. I promised to pay for all the damages. There's no need, Milian replied calmly. You didn't do it on purpose, she began, but Milian stopped her and said, examining her closely. Are you in any pain? No fever or dizziness? We'll talk more after we get that Herda out of here, she replied. Okay, she turned towards the monster and said. Then, Herda, should we head out? The monster nodded and started walking. He stomped and cracked everything on his way. Karina turned back to Milian and again said, I promised to pay for everything. I said it's fine, Milian again said. The creation growled at birds and different things, Milian said. That thing, Karina filled in. Herta, be good. You could startle people. He stopped and walks to Karina. She patted the monster, seeing that Milian sighed. This is unbelievable. Aren't you even scared? Karina replied. Excuse me? Milian pointed and said. Even these trained knights are trembling in fear. But you don't look fazed at all, she replied while leaning towards the monster. Ah, well, I'm not afraid because it knows how I feel better than anyone in this world. After that, as they were walking, Milian thought, is she somehow connected to the creatures she summons through her drawings? He asked. Karina, of all the monsters out there, why did you summon a Herda? She replied. Actually, I did it to be of help to you. Would you be angry if I said I did it to find out its weaknesses? Milian frowned inwardly. Of course I'd be upset. How could I not be? He sighed. But I never asked you to help me, she replied. I know. But, I wanted you to hunt the monsters as soon as possible without getting hurt, Milian said. Karina, you're not even well right now. There's no need for you to sacrifice yourself for other people, she cut him off. No. I didn't do it for anyone else. I did it for you, he asked. What? She said gently. Milian, if I've been of help to you, once the monster hunt is over, and we part ways, will you hold me closely? Just once? She thought. If he embraces me warmly before I leave this world, I think I'll be able to go happily without any regrets. Milian gets stunned after hearing that. Karina wondered. Did I go too far? What if he thinks that was an odd request? She said. You could think of it as a sort of goodbye present when I leave this manor, he then said. All right. I will. In return, don't do this ever again. I don't need your help. After hearing that, Karina froze for a moment, then she said, All right. If you say so. I promise not to do anything. Milian interrupted her. Karina, what I'm trying to say is… Suddenly Fong came and informed, Your Grace, Duke Ferio Carlos has arrived. Both of them went to where Ferio was. Milian called out, Ferio. He turned towards them and said, You're finally here. I was just about to leave if you didn't show up. It's been a while, Milian, and… He stopped as he saw Karina. He then stands up from his place and said, It's a pleasure to meet you, my lady. I'm Ferio Carlos. He extends his hand towards Karina. Looking at him, she thought, He's absolutely gorgeous, she replied. I'm Karina Leopold. She reached out to his hand, but Milian quickly grabs Ferio's hand. He said, It's nice to finally meet you. But I didn't exactly reach out my hand to shake yours, Milian. Milian squeezed his hand tightly and said, I'm just so happy to see you, that's all, he argued. If you're that pleased, then why didn't you run over here earlier? I've been waiting for quite some time. Milian then said, Let's sit down first. Karina was nervously looking at Milian. After retracting their hands, Ferio said, I'll let this one go for Lady Karina's sake. After chatting for some time, Ferio said, You're saying she created a monster that she had seen just once before? Milian replied, Yes. Ferio asked, But why a monster? Karina replied, I wanted to find out its weakness. I thought it'd be useful when Milian goes to hunt demonic monsters. Duke Ferio raised his teacup thinking, so it was for Milian. He then asked, Milian, has that monster disappeared? He replied, No, it's in the training hall right now. Ferio said thoughtfully, I can't say for certain before I see it for myself, but it seems like you have the miracle of creation, Lady Karina. Milian asked, And what exactly is that? Duke Ferio told, It's the rarest and strongest of all miracles. The artist can bring anything to life, as long as they have an understanding of that creation. It doesn't matter whether that thing really exists in this world. You can even create a person. At least, that's what the records said. After saying that, he said inwardly while looking at Karina, This is bad. After meeting her, I'm sure of it now. She's dying. Karina said, turning towards Milian, Did you hear that, Milian? He replied, Yes, I was right next to you when he said it. Ferio then said, I'll explain everything related to art disease soon. But more importantly, Lady Karina, she interjected, Please, call me Karina. He agreed. All right, he said. Karina, I have something to give to you. She asked, What is it? He showed a letter and said, It's a letter from your family. He told, When I visited Leopold Manor, your father asked me to deliver this to you. Karina felt uneasy remembering her father's word. Karina, how could you be such an inconsiderate sister? Behave yourself and stop whining. Karina! Karina! She felt throbbing across her body. She squeezed her hands. Suddenly Milian puts his hand on her head and said, Karina, everything's going to be all right. Calm down. I'm right here. She felt touched. Milian then said, If you want, I can throw this bastard out. After listening that, Duke Ferio thought, Perhaps it was thoughtless of me to bring that letter to someone who wanted to distance herself from her family. But how could he say something so mean? He then spoke. It seems that I've made you feel uncomfortable. Forgive me, Karina, she replied. No, it's fine. I was bound to receive it sooner or later. She opened the letter and started reading. We received news that you were in the north. What do you think you are doing? Even though you're engaged to Duke Pastellio, don't you know what kind of rumors this may stir up? Reading that, Karina said, As I expected, father is more worried about the family's reputation than he is about me. She continued reading. If you were discontent with something, you should have spoken up. How could you decide to run away? Abelia's been so worried about you that she has been having difficulty sleeping and her health has worsened. How could you do this to your sister? Karina replied to the letter inwardly. It isn't as if you would have listened. You never have. Even so, her condition probably isn't worse than mine. She continued reading. I've come up with an excuse for your absence, so don't even think about ruining our family's reputation any further. Otherwise, I'll be sure to disown you. After reading the letter, she stands up from her seat. Milian calls for her. Karina? She thinks in her mind, Father's still not convinced that I'm ill. I suppose he didn't accept it. She burned the letter in fire and said, because he couldn't afford to be inconvenienced by the truth. She asked, looking at the burning letter, Isn't that right, Count Leopold? Duke Ferial and Milian, who were looking at her, were worried. Milian asked, Karina? Are you all right? She quickly changed her expressions and replied, Should I have asked if I could dispose of the letter in the fireplace? Milian said, No, it's fine. She said, I'm sorry, it's just that the letter contained exactly what I predicted he'd say. She got interrupted by an intuition of Herta. She staggers. Seeing that, Milian shouted, Karina! He rushed to her. Karina said, Milian, the Herta. He said, Calm down, what's wrong? Karina was trembling. Duke Ferial interjected, Perhaps it has to do with her creation. Let's go check. They sprinted to Herta. Meanwhile, the guards were shouting, Everyone, get back! The monster has gone berserk. Kill it! Another shouted, No, don't attack it. Just defend yourselves. Karina reached that place, she said, Wait. But Milian quickly grabs her and points its sword at Herta. She said, Milian? He said, It's dangerous, step back. Karina. She protested, No, there must be a reason why it's behaving like this. I need to figure that out first. Then Milian frowned at a guard and asked, What happened? The guard began, Well, moments ago, 2 guards were keeping watch at Herta. One of them said, Do you think it's all right to leave it be like that? The other said, His Grace gave permission for it to stay here, so I suppose so. Looking at how Baved Herta was, one said, It's so calm. How strange. One of them reaches for his sword and said, Then, should we find its weakness while we have the chance? Back to the present. Milian frowned at the guard. I thought I clearly gave orders to leave it alone. He pleaded, Forgive me, Your Grace. Then Milian released Karina and said, Karina? I'm sorry. It looks like my knights caused all this. She said, It's fine. I'll try to calm it down. Milian began carry, but FOT interrupted by Ferial. May I interject? It seems as though you've all forgotten that I'm here. Since that's Karina's creation, she should be able to control it. There doesn't need to be any bloodshed. I'm the expert on miracles, so trust me. But Milian was still looking unconvinced. Then Milian ordered, Tell everyone to step away from that Herta. The guard complied. Yes, Your Grace. Then Milian gets close to Karina and murmurs something to her. After that he left, saying, Have everyone be on their guard. Then Ferial comes to Karina and said, Karina, may I ask you something? She replied. Yes, he asked. How long do your creations usually last? She told. They usually vanish after a few hours at least. The longest they lasted was about a day, Duke Ferial then said. Incredible. Then I suspect that it won't be very difficult to make the Herta disappear. She nodded and then starts walking towards Herta. She went close to Herta and said, It's all right. Don't be scared. After hearing that, the creation spoke to Karina in her mind. Karina, you can do as you wish. I'll protect you no matter what. After that, Milian commanded the servants to fix the broken things. He glanced towards Karina's room. She was in her room. She said aloud, I shouldn't be spacing out like this. She gets determined and starts writing a letter. She thinks in her mind, Now it's time to put an end to things. I realized something after meeting so many kind people. There's no need to compare my talent with that of others. I have someone who praises my work, saying it's the best. And there's no need to hide my pain from other people either, as I'm no longer alone. I've met those who encourage me to tell them when I'm in pain. I deserve to be loved. After writing the letter, she thought, Now all I have to do is send this letter. Then Milian came and said, Karina, I called for you many times, but you wouldn't answer. She said, Milian. She turned towards him and asked, Has everything been settled? He replied, Yes, to some extent. More importantly, are you writing a reply? She admitted. Yes. I think it's time to really say goodbye, he said. I see. Looking at the letter, Karina said, My parents will probably resent me, won't they? Milian squeezed her hand and reassured her. Let them. A child can't choose their parents. They're born due to their parents' decision. Therefore, all parents must take full responsibility for their children. Just because a parent gives their child enough food to eat and a warm place to sleep doesn't mean that all of the child's needs have been taken care of. There's more to being a parent than that. So it's okay to complain, Karina. If anyone dares to insult you for it, then I'll step forward and take your side. After hearing that, Karina beamed with joy. Thank you, Milian, he replied. Huh, right. Then would you mind sparing me a moment of your time? Then they went to a room which Milian prepared for her to do drawing. Looking at it, Karina gets amazed. Goodness, Milian, this is… She turned to him and he blushed and said, I made an atelier for you. It's probably nowhere near as fancy as those in the south, but just think of it as a small gift. Karina remembered, back at Leopold Manor, I didn't even have a proper atelier. My room didn't get much sunlight during the day or at night, so it wasn't a good environment to draw in. But this is everything that I could have ever asked for. This is more precious than any present that I've received so far. She went close to easel and touched it. Milian asked, Do you like it? She flinched upon hearing that. She wondered, So why does my heart hurt so much? She said. I told you not to treat me so kindly, he replied. Karina, this is just a gift. She was feeling throbbing pain but still spoke. I haven't done anything for you to deserve such a lavish gift, Milian, he replied. What do you mean you haven't done anything? You summoned a herda for me. That was quite helpful, she said. But you said that you'd pay me back for that later. You agreed to give me a hug when we part ways. Besides, the herda hurt people and made a mess. I imagine fixing the damages must have cost you quite a bit. Milian averted his gaze while sweating. Karina kept staring at him. He said, Well, Karina chuckled in turns. She said, I'm just thankful that you exempted me from paying the repair costs. Now I no longer need to worry about running out of art materials. And this room gets so much sunlight that I'll be able to draw whenever I'd like. It's a splendid atelier. It's too precious to be used for just 6 months. Hearing that, Milian said, If it's all right with you, you can stay for more than half a year. Even if you return to Leopold Manor, you may return whenever you want to use it. She was fidgeting while saying, No, I've already promised to stay for just 1 year. And you'll probably find someone else. As a partner, it won't be appropriate for me to come here whenever I please, he replied. Someone else? Even so, you can come. Karina cut him off. Thanks for the offer, Milian. Really, he said, all right. The owner of the art supply store is going to come again tomorrow. If you need anything, make sure to tell him. I'll be going now. After he left, he closed the door. Her words were still roaming his mind. I haven't done anything for you to deserve such a lavish gift, Milian. I've already promised to stay for just 1 year. It won't be appropriate for me to come here whenever I please. He said there are only 6 months left now. He thinks while walking, is she really planning to leave after that? She was allowed to stay here for a year because of her promise to break off the engagement. I suppose it's only natural for her to keep thinking about leaving. It seems like she was forced to get engaged, just like I was. Ha! The monster hunt is just around the corner. I don't have time to be thinking about this, he realized. No, wait, but why am I thinking about Karina so much? As he was standing there busy thinking, Ferial came and asked, What's on your mind? You'll get wrinkles if you keep frowning like that, Milian asked. What are you doing here? Duke Ferial shrugged. I came to see Karina, not you. Fawn told me that she was here, Milian asked. Karina? He realized. Is it because of her art disease? Ferial replied. Yes. Dr. Winston told me a few things as well. I wanted to see her condition and her drawings for myself, Milian said. Then I suppose she's in good hands. You know much more about art disease than I do, Duke Ferial replied. Of course. I'll do my best, then Milian said. I'm a bit busy, so I should get going now. After he left, Ferial said aloud, If he's that busy, what is he doing here? Wait, could he be? Meanwhile, in Karina's mind, her own words were spinning. And you'll probably find someone else. As a partner. It won't be appropriate for me to come here whenever I please, she said to herself. Karina, you fool. I was actually really touched by what Milian said. Asterisk. Then she heard knock on the door. She heard, Karina, it's me, Ferial. May I come in? She replied. Yes, come in. Duke Ferial came inside and asked, Good afternoon. How do you feel? She walks to him and replied, I'm just fine. I wanted to thank you for what you did last time, he said. Not at all. All I did was tell you what I knew. More importantly, Karina, she replied. Yes? He said. Dr. Winston told me that you have art disease. If it's all right with you, I'd like to speak with you about it. She gets stunned. Her mind raced. Dr. Winston told him? She spoke. Then, shall we take a seat first? After they sat down, her mind was still at. Did Dr. Winston reveal everything? I begged him not to tell anyone that I'm dying. She squeezed her hands nervously. Noticing that, Ferial said, Just so you know, Dr. Winston didn't voluntarily disclose your situation to me. I pestered him into telling me your condition. That's how severe I suspected your illness was. She asked. How did you? He began. It's thanks to the long-kept records of art disease my family owns. As you know, House Carlos has financially supported artists for a very long time. Among the artists, some had the miracle of creation, like you. After hearing that, Karina said, I see. I wasn't even aware that such a disease existed till 6 months ago, Ferial said. That doesn't surprise me. The miracle of creation is extremely rare. On top of that, your ability seems very close to the power of a deity. She gets shocked. Really? He replied. Yes. Most creations that come to life from a drawing rarely last for more than a day. And there's no record of a creation of that scale, Karina said. I never thought much of my abilities. Ferial, did all the artists who had the miracle of creation use their life force in exchange for their art? He said. Yes. Artists that had the miracle of creation. I'll call them creators. They all came down with art disease and died before they turned 30. None of them had a strong attachment to life, only their drawings. The more they drew, the more insane they got. They even used their own flesh and blood as materials and had no qualms about sacrificing their lives for their work. Hearing that, Karina said in her mind, Goodness, but I understand why they would go to such lengths. I don't think I would have a problem doing that either. Ferial added, Karina, I want to help you. And in order to do that, you mustn't hide anything from me, not even trivial details. So if you have the symptoms that I'm about to list, tell me, she replied. Okay, he began. Other than becoming insane, creators grow more neurotic and emotionally unstable, and draw drawing after drawing as if they're under a trance. Some records also say that creators claim their creations are the only ones that understand them, and regard them as their everything. Karina said, I have all those symptoms. As time passes, I feel more sensitive about everything and I keep drawing as if I've been hypnotized, but I can't seem to stop myself. No one ever cared about my feelings, but my creations knew exactly how I felt. I was so lonely, so that's why. Ferial gets shocked after hearing that. He stands up and said, Karina, I'm not trying to admonish you. In the end, you're going to be the one that suffers more if you continue running away like that. If you let your anger, sadness, and loneliness take over you as you draw, you'll surely regret it. He asked. I heard that you don't have much time left. Is that correct? She replied. Yes. He asked again. Do you have any intention of giving up drawing? She replied while smiling. No, this is all I have, he said. I see. I understand, Karina asked. Really? He said. Yes, just as you pour everything you have into your drawings, I myself devote my all to music. When I was young, I played my flute so passionately every single day that my parents even ordered a maid to keep a watch on me. Of course, I found ways to hide from her and kept playing. It's not easy to give up the joy of creation, Karina chuckled. He peeked at her and added, Anyway, Karina, if it's all right with you, may I ask you for a favor? She asked. What kind of favor is it? He said. I want to see you draw. To be direct, I want to see you use your ability, she said. Then, I was just about to leave a letter at Leopold Manor. Shall I draw a door that leads to it? After that, he picks up the paint and brush and stands in front of large canvas to draw. Ferial was standing beside her. He asked, Are you going to paint without sketching anything first? She replied, Yes, I want to paint quickly right now. After she began to draw, Ferial was in awe. Goodness, this is just incredible. I can't take my eyes off of it. I've never seen such powerful, yet detailed brushstrokes. I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a painting, watching a breathtaking view. Her talent is beautiful and lovely. How can I express this surging emotion to her? Karina felt pain and thinks, I feel like something's pressing down on my chest. But I'm not finished yet. She then heard a voice. Ha! This sound is, Ferial is playing his flute. What a warm and calm melody. She felt refreshed. It's a lot easier to breathe now. My body feels lighter as well. How amazing! Is this Ferial's healing power? It's a very beautiful and lovely tune. After completing, she said, I'm done. She asked. Ferial, what is the name of that piece you just played? He said. Karina, she asked. Yes, he said. I think I just fell in love with you. She felt annoyed. What? He asked. How did you like my performance? She replied. It was exquisite, he said. I was inspired by the sight of you painting and improvised. I always carry my flute with me. Karina gets surpsed and exclaimed. Are you saying that you just made up that song on the spot? He told. Yes, I heard the melody in my head the moment I saw your painting. It was that splendid, she said. Thank you, he said. This is just my personal opinion. I hope I didn't make you feel uncomfortable. Anyway, does it take a while for your miracle to take effect? She said. Yes, I think that it's activated right after I finish my painting. He stares at the painting and said, is that so? And you're saying that this door will lead to Leopold Manor, yes? He thought. If that's really possible, then it seems she indeed possesses a godly power. She then grabs the doorknob and said, Yes, I'm going to go now. Are you joining me as well, Ferial? He said. I will. After going inside the door, Ferial looked around and asked, Is this a spare room in the manor? Karina looked at felt relieved. Nothing's changed, she said. No, this is my room, he said. Forgive me. This place is quite different from the rooms of other noble ladies, she said. It's fine. I can understand why you thought that, as the rooms of most young noblewomen are fancy. My sister's room is like that. It's adorned with lace, and the curtains are colorful. She has lots of dolls as well. I'd bet the rooms of most young noble ladies are similar as well. I was too busy looking after my sister that I didn't have time to make friends, so I've never seen them for myself. But I feel a little sad about that because I've always wanted a friend, Ferial quickly said. There's no need to be saddened, Karina. I'm here, he added. We've gotten to know each other, and we've even set out on an adventure like this. He extends his hand smiling and said, Don't you think that this would make us friends? Also, as I know everything about your situation, I can give you advice. As a fellow artist, I can empathize with you, and since I have a lot of time on my hands, I can go with you to various places, Karina said. But I don't know what friends are supposed to do together. Do you still want to be my friend despite that, Ferial? He replied. Of course. Besides, it's never too late to learn about such things, she said. Then, let's be friends, Ferial. She shakes his hand, he said. Of course, then Karina said. Now that we're friends, there's something I want to ask you, he said. Yes? What is it? She asked. How do you know what the rooms of other noble ladies are like? He flinched after hearing that. She nervously asked. Most men can't enter a lady's room unless they're that lady's fiancé. If you have a fiancé, wouldn't me becoming your friend complicate things? He said. I don't have a fiancé, she asked. Ferial, are you? He filled in. Karina, I think you've misunderstood something. I was simply invited to have tea. That's how I know. Really, that's it, she chuckled. Okay, I believe you, he asked. Then are you going to deliver your letter now? She pointed and said. Well, I was planning to just put it here, but as you can see, I have no way of knowing when my family will discover it. I want to leave it and go back in secret, if possible. But I risk being seen because there are so many servants wandering in the manor, Ferial said. I can help you with that. While showing his flute, he said, Karina, could you open the window a little bit? And please cover your ears. Outside the manor, two maids were sweeping. One asked, Don't you think the atmosphere is quite tense in the manor these days? The other replied, Absolutely. I can barely breathe. She continued, Have you been in the dining room during supper time? Count Leopold and her ladyship hardly talk anymore. Lord Enfrick doesn't even come home, and Lady Abelia has recently become so depressed that she barely eats. And Lord Felden keeps nervously looking around. Just where in the world has Lady Karina gone? She must return soon. One filled in, exactly. Everyone is worried. Suddenly they heard sound of music coming from the room. One asked, Don't you hear music coming from somewhere? Other replied, You're right. That's Lady Karina's room, who left the windows open. After hearing the music they started feeling nauseous and drowsy. One said, But why am I suddenly so drowsy? The other filled in, Me too. This has never happened before. After Ferial put everyone to sleep with his music, Karina said, I never imagined you'd put them to sleep. He replied, It's a trivial trick, compared to what you can do. She denied, No, not at all. He chuckled, Everyone in the manor is asleep. If there's anyone you'd like to see before leaving, you should go see them. Karina said with serious expressions, There's no one I want to see. Noticing her reaction, Ferial asked, Lady Karina, the letter you wanted to deliver to your family. Is it a goodbye letter? She replied, yes. In it, I wrote that they should stop being concerned about me. She explained, Count Leopold won't believe that I'm sick till he sees my dead body. Only when he sees my cold corpse will he regret his decision a little. But I'm sure that he'll just be enraged soon afterward. Why didn't she tell me sooner? She caused her parents trouble till the very end. He'll raise his voice, saying that I should have said something earlier. But when I desperately begged him for attention, he didn't even look my way once. As they were, she saw Abilia unconscious lying beside a pillar. She calls her Abilia. She gets close to her to check on her. Ferial said, she's fine. She's simply asleep like everyone else. Karina said, yes, it seems like she is. After examining her, Karina thought, what a relief. She looks healthy. She then said, Ferial, if you don't mind, could you please help me move her? He agreed, of course, Karina. He picks up Abilia. Karina said, please carry her to her bed over there. Hearing that, Ferial nodded. After putting Abilia in her bed, he looked around in her room. He noticed drawings lying around. He wondered, what are these? He turned towards Karina and said, Karina, these drawings are. He stopped in the middle as he saw Karina whispering something to Abilia. Then Karina asked, shall we go now? He replied, yes. After closing the door, Ferial said, Karina, I thought you were on bad terms with your family. You said earlier that there was no one that you wanted to see. Karina started walking, saying, our relationship wasn't horrible. She said inwardly, on the surface, we were a perfectly happy family. And that's because no one knew that their happiness was made possible with someone's sacrifice. She began, I'm the good, ordinary, and obedient second daughter. As long as Abilia is sick, and Frick always brings good news, and Felden is a troublemaker, I won't be able to live for myself here. So I wanted to spend what little time I have left doing things for myself. She turned to Ferial. You know, Ferial. He replied, yes, Karina? She told, I want to leave my artwork in this world not as Abilia's sister or the oldest daughter in the Leopold family, but as Karina, the painter. And in order to do that, I must first forget everything about this place. Later, when the Count Leopold returned to his manor, a servant informed him. He asked, what did you say happened at the manor? The servant replied, well, a moment ago, something strange happened. The Count asked, strange? Elaborate. The servant said, everyone in the manor, including me, fell asleep for a while. The Count asked, everyone? The servant bowed, yes, please forgive me. According to my investigation, no one remembers anything after hearing a song. The Count said, that's absolutely ridiculous. Then he noticed a letter. What's that letter? The servant said, huh? A letter? No letters arrived at the manor today. The Count picks up the letter and started opening it, saying, So did anything go missing, or did anyone get hurt? The servant replied, we checked, but everything seems to be fine. Looking at the envelope, the Count thought, this seal looks familiar, but there's nothing written on the envelope. Did someone put everyone to sleep to leave this letter here? The intruder went through all that trouble, but it doesn't seem as if there's anything special about this letter here. He started reading the letter. Dear Count Leopold, he realized, this handwriting looks familiar. Whose could it be? The letter continued, if I begin this letter like this, I'm sure that you'll be wondering who I am. He thought, it's as if the writer knows me very well. The letter continued, there are so many things I wanted to say if I had the chance, but they don't matter anymore. I have a terminal illness, therefore I won't ever be returning to Leopold Manor. Reading that, he thought, could it be Karina? The letter my daughter sent was surprisingly short and to the point. She declared, consider this letter my last farewell. I'm going to become famous as Karina, not Karina Leopold. He thought, the tone of her letter was so stern and cold that I wondered if it had really been written by her. She sounded fiercely determined, making me doubt that she had been threatened into writing it. She mentioned that her name would spread from the far north to the central part of the empire, where you live. You always told me not to tarnish the reputation of our family, and I believe I have upheld that principle well, until now. But now, I ask something of you. Do not tarnish my reputation when I become well known throughout the land. She continued, I am done waiting. I am in love with someone who makes my heart flutter. Did you know there's a world out there where I am the protagonist? A world where I am not overshadowed by Abilia, Felden, or Enfric. In that world, no one raises their hand against me or threatens to throw me out of the house. This is because I am loved. No one yells at me or punishes me under the guise of, it's for my own good. Instead, I am gently scolded, treated with care and kindness. Suddenly a servant came and opens the door. The Count was saying, "What a wicked, ungrateful child after everything I did to raise her." Noticing his anger, the servant said, "My lord." The letter continued, "You may be furious at your wicked, ungrateful daughter, who you believe should have said something sooner. But did I truly never speak out? Was I always the obedient girl who never cried?" Reading that, the Count wondered, "Karina, when did you stop crying?" The letter continued, "It's not that I never tried to speak. I simply gave up trying to talk to you. If you wish to see me, come to the north yourself. I will not return to Leopold Manor. Feel free to tell everyone that I am dead." After reading that, the Count crumpled the letter and throws it away. He shouted, "Contact Duke Pastellio immediately! I must tell him to send Karina back at once." The servant hesitatingly replied, "But isn't it impossible to enter the north now that the checkpoint has been closed?" Then the Count said, "It doesn't matter. Something must have happened to her. Karina isn't the kind of person who would say such things. A terminal illness? Telling everyone that she's dead? How could she say that to her parent?" He picks up the glass to drink. Then the servant said, "Lady Karina really may be ill." The Count stopped in the middle as he was drinking. He said, "Are you trying to make me even angrier?" The servant told, "A few months ago, there was a report of her vomiting in her room." The Count asked, "What? Why was I not informed immediately?" The servant replied, "Well, I did. But every time you had other business to attend to and ordered that it be reported later. You told me that there was no need to report something like that every time it happens. You also said that since she is a grown woman who could take care of herself." The Count said, "Even so, I should have been informed." The servant said, "Forgive me, my lord." The Count ordered, "Firstly, fetch me some parchment. I will write to Duke Pastellio immediately." Abelia was listening to everything. She trembled in fear, realizing that wasn't a dream. The Count continued, "Once Karina returns, I will speak to her properly. I'm sure that will solve everything." Abelia went back to her room. She was crying. She said aloud, "No, father. Karina isn't coming back." She remembered Karina whispering, "Abelia, goodbye. I hope you stay healthy." She thinks in her mind, "She will never come back." Meanwhile, Karina was rubbing the wallet. She said, "Stay healthy. I must be stupid. How foolish of me to think I could forget it all. Still, I spent the most time with her, so perhaps it's fine." She then walks to the table and said, "I planned to send this letter with this bird, but..." She draws a bird and made it came to reality. She said to the bird, "I trust that you'll follow my instructions." The bird flies away with the wallet. Karina said, "Take this wallet and get rid of it, so I won't ever have to see it again." This is truly the end.